what we're going to do. We'll axe the consumer carbon tax. We will get the large polluters to pay for incentives for people in Halifax, across Nova Scotia, Atlantic Canada, across the country, to make investments in cleaner appliances, in EVs if they want, to insulate their home, and on and on.
Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney today saying clearly if he becomes leader, he'll immediately remove the consumer portion of the carbon tax. That interview with our very own Todd Battis at CTV Atlantic. Now, he has supported the tax in the past, but he says instead he'll introduce a green incentive plan. Other leadership contenders, Chrystia Freeland, said she would also remove the consumer portion, while Karina Gould has committed to freeze the current price on carbon. But that's not the only major Liberal policy plank the party is rethinking. Finance Minister today, Dominic LeBlanc, announced the federal government is deferring the implementation of changes to the inclusion rate on capital gains. It will instead kick in on January 1st, 2026. Changes to capital gains was one of the feature parts of the Liberal budget last spring. So if you're scoring at home, it's two significant policies that the Liberals are shifting on in recent weeks. So is this just the natural progression of the leadership race, or are we watching a new show called Extreme Makeover Liberals Edition? Let's bring back the front bench. Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradis, Gurritan Singh, and Rachel Aiello. I'm going to start with you on this one, Melanie, because, I mean, I heard axe the tax in there, and the first thing I thought was, what?
Yeah. I mean, and this is a guy, Mark Carney has spent the past decade supporting carbon tax. He wrote about it in his book. He's an advocate for the carbon tax. And so now he's proposing to have not a consumer tax, have it be on industry instead. Look, can you trust this guy? Absolutely not. He's been talking about a carbon tax for 10 years, and then he changes his mind, and all of a sudden he's going to axe it in one day. Like I don't think that Canadians are going to trust the Liberals with this at all. They know that the only person that they can rely on to scrap the carbon tax is Pierre Poilievre.
Sabrina, we were on radio together on Wednesday where you made a joke about NDP leader Jagmeet Singh changing his mind on supporting the Liberals. You said that he probably wore flip-flops to that press conference. What do you call this?
I think this is an evolution of policy. I think the worst thing for people who are in politics or policymakers to dwell on is to not actually evolve policy for the time in which it exists and which they exist. I think that the carbon tax has proven to be successful and has proven to be an important part of the Liberals' climate policy here in Canada and abroad. It's really brought us into the climate conversation around the world, and it's been an important step in our leadership. But is that going to necessarily be the only and same policy that we need going forward? Well, when we brought in the carbon tax, there weren't Trump tariffs either. There's a lot of things that have changed in the world over the last 10 years, and I think that the smartest thing that politicians can do is actually not dig in their heels and make smart choices for evolving times. And so I actually think that both, the leadership candidates have made the right choice here in evolving that policy thinking.
Gurritan, do you take that as an evolution or turning their back on it?
I think that they have not only turned their back on it, they've also just mismanaged everything regarding price on pollution since day one. This started at the carve-out, where we saw they had this huge inconsistency for Atlantic Canada, which is clearly tied to electoral results. And now you see beyond that a policy coming forward that sounds a lot like the NDP's earlier criticism of the carbon tax, the fact that the Liberals had always put a greater focus on everyday consumers as opposed to big polluters. And that's why the NDP had a revised position on it months ago, and we see once again the Liberals following suit. But I think Canadians realize that they can't trust the Liberals when it comes to putting a price onto pollution and maintaining it in a manner that actually puts the onus on where it should be, which is big polluters. So I think this just demonstrates how poorly they've managed this, how poorly they've communicated this policy. And this flip-flopping, I think, just creates more confusion and ultimately negatively impacts a policy across the board that should be thoughtfully analyzed. And we need something, of course, to address this issue. But they're just creating so much confusion and distrust in the public with regards to a price on pollution.
And Rachel, it would seem that now the next step for this is to take it to the members that we have heard now 400,000 are ready to vote for in this leadership race. And really, it feels like, you know, that issue won't be part of any kind of debate. It seems like none of the candidates are really hanging on to it right now.
We'll see. I do think Justin Trudeau was clearly deeply unpopular. He acknowledged that in his resignation. So these candidates did need to take a note that the Canadian public was feeling some type of way and show how they were going to differentiate from the Prime Minister. But yes, to the point of debates, I do wonder how this will play out in the two debates that we've confirmed are happening. The party is saying there will be one in English, one in French, and I'll be curious to hear just beyond how they're going to try to differentiate on what they're not going to do. I'm curious to hear what new ideas, what different things these candidates are going to bring to the table to refresh the Liberal conversation beyond basically doing a referendum on the last 10 years of the things that they're now going to scrap.
Yeah, got only a couple of minutes. I'm going to try and get everybody in on this. But Melanie, capital gains deferral. I mean, do you think that, again, this is a rejection of government past, even though it's being done by this current government? Like, you know, how do you read that?
No, it's just that has been a mess from start to finish. From the moment they introduced it and the debates that have ensued around it, and then they had to, you know, try to pass supply and budget bills around it without actually pushing it forward. Now they're not actually getting rid of it; they're delaying it. So the threat of the tax is still there, and the impact it's going to have on driving investment out of the country is still there. It's just kick the can down the road. They should have just scrapped it entirely.
But Sabrina, I guess it's ultimately up to whoever comes in next, right?
I think that's why they've left it open to 2026. I think, I agree with Mel. I don't think that this policy has necessarily been well implemented or well communicated upon, evergreen statement. But I think that they want the next leader to make that decision. And I think a lot of it will depend on, a 2-week, 3-month, 12-month outlook on what the tariffs look like and how that has had impacted investment and what other changes we need to make to our economy.
Gerdeton, what do you think about what they've done with this?
I just think it's another example of a really poorly communicated and implemented policy from the Liberals. And it just really demonstrates that this, throughout their mandate, but particularly in these last couple of years, it's just been so much wishy-washy policy and positioning from the Liberals. And all it does, I think, is create so much lack of trust that they're actually firmly steering the ship of our economy, of our country, and otherwise. And it resulted in what we're seeing is this, great lack of popularity that they're experiencing right now.
Okay, unfortunately, all out of time. We got to leave it right there. Thanks to Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradzi, Gerdeton Singh, and Rachel Aiello.